but whose vision eventually led to the formation of the Grand Rapids Urban League. And then there was Floyd Skinner, a graduate of Central High School, the University of Michigan, and its law school, who was Mr. Civil Rights, Mr. NAACP in this city for 34 years before his untimely death in 1962. And one of the most colorful persons, Mr. William Glenn, was the doorman at the Pantland Hotel, which is today the Amway Grand Plaza Hotel. He became an industrial worker and a member of the Communist Party because he felt it was the only political party who practiced integration and cared about the lives of working people. After a trip to Russia, Mr. Glenn was required to testify in the McCarthy-led congressional hearings in Detroit. And finally, there are civic activists like Helen Clater, who recently died, who was the first African-American woman elected to the local YWCA's board and the first African-American woman to be elected as the national president of the YWCA. And there is the ever-enduring legacy of Paul I. Phillips, who diligently worked through study and persuasion to influence enduring social change in this community. Long before I conceived of writing a history of African Americans in this city, Paul Phillips had urged in the Grand Rapids Press and as a member of the Grand Rapids School Board that this kind of history be written and taught. And thank God for all the white allies along the way who risked soiling their own reputation to join the cause of black freedoms. You know, those allies risked themselves to join black freedom struggle. And that is something that we all have to do, is risk ourselves sometimes here in Grand Rapids. It ain't easy being black. And if you come into our cause, you risk your reputation, and these people put their reputation on the line. This story would be incomplete if I didn't mention Samuel Graves once again, the pastor of that Fountain Street Baptist Church, now just Fountain Street, who became the second president of Morehouse College in the 1880s. It should be duly noted that the oldest building on that college's campus is named after Graves. Without Graves' leadership in the early days of Morehouse, we might not be talking about Martin Luther King Jr., who is, of course, Morehouse's most famous graduate. There was also Martin J. Comedy, a local attorney who brought the first significant civil rights case in Grand Rapids history in 1908, McCoy versus Grand Rapids Medical College. And that story is just very simple. Grand Rapids Medical College, before we have Medical Row here, you know, was a veterinarian school. Two young men had registered to go to school, was admitted to school. Students protested, burned black figures in effigy, and they sued for their right to go to Grand Rapids Medical College, to be veterinarians. Students protested. Eventually, the college asked to dismiss the students, and they brought suit. And Martin Comedy brought that suit in 1908. He lost that case before the Michigan Supreme Court. His brilliant argument would eventually aid in legally overturning segregation in Michigan later. Some almost 20 years later, William Messenger, a graduate of the University of Michigan Law School, assisted Oliver M. Green, an African-American lawyer, in appealing the case of Bolden versus Grand Rapids Operating Corporation to the state Supreme Court. This case would successfully overthrow de facto segregation in public accommodations throughout Michigan. Those white allies. But there's one in particular I have to cite out today, because she is the most unusual in my book. The most notable and remarkable of all is Hilary Bissell, who, although married into the wealthy Bissell family, defied her social class standing and was a lifelong warrior in our local civil rights struggle. Bissell joined the NAACP in 1950 and became one of its most ardent members. On behalf of the NAACP, she assisted in challenging all of our city institutions to end the practices of segregation. She was not a fashionable liberal that simply talked about the problems. I meet them all the time. She put her life into the struggle for justice. This story about African Americans and their struggle has to include recognition of those white citizens who care deeply enough about fairness and justice for all our citizens to make a stand. I'm sure when it's finally released, when you read African Americans in the Furniture City, there will be information that many of you may possess which will add to our community's historical understanding. That's what happens when you write a history. People soon point out all the information that you should have included. The past is always incompletely documented, especially in 264 pages. However, let me humbly submit to you that there are some valuable things we can learn from this local history as I have written it. To my African American brothers and sisters, we have a strong history that precedes us. There is something to be proud of about living here in Grand Rapids. Hidden beneath all the rubbish stands a legacy worth emulating. The institutional powers of their day oftentimes relegated our foreparents here to being second-class citizens. They, however, knew that they were not and fought to have access to what they were rightfully entitled to. In spite of efforts to block them, they educated their children, bought property, networked with one another, ran for political office, built churches, and opened doors to you and me. We owe it to them. We owe it to them to continue the struggle and engage in it from wherever we are stationed in life. Though abject discrimination dominated their lives, they made no excuses. They fought those things which were harmful to their community with an intense ferocity. We must do the same. And like them, we must build cultural institutions that nurture our very best gifts. To the larger community here, this history shows that we are indeed conflicted. At once, we define our community by its religiosity. God, when I first came to Grand Rapids, I had never seen so many churches in my life.